All right, welcome back to the Possibility Storm. We're having a special bonus episode this week because, as most of you may know, I did not stream last weekend due to this thing, the Sanctuary Inaugural Open Series, which is a cPDH tournament that is getting started. This was the first one. They're planning on doing them monthly, and as a result, I was participating in this instead of playing Magic on my stream. So there wasn't really anything for me to release. I have games in my backlog, but I didn't really want to release any of those, nor do the editing. So I thought, hey, I haven't seen anybody talk about this series outside of, well, the TO did put out an episode, I think yesterday, at the time of this recording, that kind of did a little bit of a breakdown of the decks that were in it and stuff, but they beat me to the punch, I guess, in that regard, but I still wanted to kind of give a general overarching coverage of what happened and talk about some of the decks that were there, maybe get into a little bit more detail with the top four. And then later on in the show, I have the winner of the whole thing. It's going to be coming on here, and I'm going to ask him some questions and get his whole perspective on taking the tournament down. So I reached out to Puzzlebox here. That he's been on the show before where we've played some of the cPDH games, but he's a mod for that server that is running this thing and someone who's very knowledgeable, so I thought he would be able to kind of bring in some stats and other knowledge that I don't have to kind of round this out. And I'm also going to be guest starring on their podcast, Common Theory, which is going to be coming out, I think, next week. So we're just kind of doing an all-out collab between the two channels, getting all this stuff talked about. So, without further ado, well, first of all, Puzzle, hello, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm all right. Just trying to figure out how to navigate doing one of these because it's my first time. So, we're gonna learn together, I suppose. I want to make sure I didn't misspeak. I know you are a mod for that server. I don't know how deep your involvement goes. If you could give us kind of a rundown on that real quick.
Yeah, I'm just kind of helping make sure everything runs smoothly, help set up a bit, help plan everything out with Bobby and Gator, all that fun stuff. Just one of the people who's helping out around with the tournament and such.
Okay, so not exactly a founder, but like basically somebody that's been there since the beginning.
Yeah.
Cool. Top tier supporter, we'll call you. All right. So this got announced, about a month ago, I think? I just randomly got an invite to follow them on Twitter, and then it was like, did the digging, because there's a website. I'll put all of that kind of links to those things in the show notes here. But yeah, I followed along the links and was like, yeah, I'm interested. I didn't really have, I don't think, a good enough deck prior to this to compete, so I went ahead and put together something that I thought would actually show up and not scrub out, and I think I managed to do that. I at least notched one win out of the tournament, so, not the worst showing. Obviously not the best, but, hey, better than some,
definitely
worse than others.
Definitely a competent deck, that's for sure.
So the tournament ended up being 16 players that registered, so it was on the smaller side, but again, brand new, still trying to spread the word, which is also part of the reason why I wanted to do this, because I hope that future tournaments will be larger so we can have that cut to 16 and then cut to top four and then, have that finals. In this case, it was 3 rounds of Swiss, and then, top 4 seeded players got to be in the final, and some of us missed out just because we got one extra loss instead of a draw. Other people squeaked in because they got some draws. So, is what it is. Nothing I can do to control that. But yeah, I'm hoping in the future, just for that cut to top 16, just to get that extra game in, and because obviously all of us would have made top 16 at this rate. But
yeah, there's 70 people in the server, so hopefully more people start playing. Mother's Day weekend was the timing of this first one, which is unfortunate and probably talked a few people out of it, but
I'm sure that had a little bit to do with it. I ended up having to take the day off from work because it was 7 a.m. my time when it started, and I normally would be at work still, so Yeah, it was for people who have weekends off and are East Coast, perfect timing probably. But for anybody that's anywhere else and has a weird schedule like me, it was a little awkward. But yeah, and it's still cool that there was at least this many people that showed up. I know you and Gator weren't even really originally supposed to play. Had to kind of fill it in to get the pods going. But so, thanks for that. But sorry, you did not do as good as you maybe wanted to.
I liked being on commentary.
Yeah, I think you did a good job with that. I watched the other games that I didn't play, and you and Bobby and I can't remember the other gentleman's name.
Alcadron, Dave.
Yeah, you guys all were pretty good. You were especially good at just knowing what the people were doing before they did it, which was kind of weird and clairvoyant and spooky, but
played a lot of this format.
Clearly. And you've won the tournament yourself, right? So you're already familiar with doing that.
Budget cPDH tournament, but, close enough. I was playing Gretchen.
I mean, if it could take on cPDH decks, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So again, we had 16 decks, and out of that, it looks like the most popular was Gretchen, played by yourself and 3 other people, one of which did make it to the final. Otherwise, there was 3 TPIs.
Iconoclast, yep.
Yep. One of those also making it to the final. There were 2 gut players that did not post those results. I don't know if any of them got any wins either. I'm not sure on the standings.
Yeah, I'd have to check the actual command tower. I think one of them probably got at least a win. But
I meant to have that open before we started, and then I didn't open it. And now I'm using all my screen real estate, so... and then, otherwise, there were some single iterations with Joe on Parcel Beast, which didn't seem like it would be that good, but I actually saw it do a lot. And then we had a Finn the Fangbear, which is weird. I built that deck at some point. I don't know that it's good enough for a tournament play, but I'm not sure what it did in the tournament either, because I did not play against it. Then we had a Dargo Keleth list, which, again, weird on paper, but very powerful. And then finally me on Malcolm Kedis, which we did have 2 Malcolms, although the other was played by Clay, and he was using Dargo as the partner pairing. Did make it to the finals there. And then there was only one Abdel, which was Gator, who got the whole thing taken care of on the way to winning every game he played, which was incredible. And it was with the background Sword Coast Sailor. So I thought we could kind of touch on some of the lists that didn't make it to the finals before we get into the more top-end stuff. So how about we start with yours? You could tell us a little bit about what your list does, because I'm sure the Gretchens are all pretty similar, probably pivoting into certain different areas, but they're similar builds. So
so I actually checked my Gretchen list compared to the others. The one I was playing was a bit different from the version that I have public. It was a couple cards different.
Sure.
The 2 Gretchens that did not make top 4 were the exact same as my public version. So they were just playing the stock standard version of Gretchen. And the one that did make top 4 was about 5 cards different. Some of cards I disagree with, some that I'm going to try out myself. But
for sure.
For the most part, Gretchen is a very streamlined deck. You're playing a bunch of creatures that untap lands, like Arbor Elf or Blossom Dryad. And the goal is to use land enchantments that make your lands tap for additional mana to ramp, and then get more value by untapping those lands, and then go infinite with something like a Freed from the Real on one of those land untappers. Use Gretchen as an outlet, draw your deck, do whatever you want from there.
And what is a typical win con? Once you've gotten that infinite mana and you're drawing your deck, like, what would you do next?
So basically, my version is on a couple win conditions. You have Sapphire Charm and Compulsive Research, which allow you to make a target player draw cards. alongside Capsize to bounce every permanent in play. And then you can Capsize your own Archaeomancer back to your hand to repeatedly cast the spells that make target player draw cards, and you can make everybody draw their decks out.
Gotcha.
And if you have to, you can Capsize every permanent, restack your deck with Mystic Sanctuary, and just punch people to death with Archaeomancers and little 1/1s and 2/2s, and just bounce everything.
If they have no permanents, yeah, that's still gonna win. So cool. Yeah, I think it's a pretty powerful list. I know you played it, I believe, on my channel and won. But there was somebody that
I believe so.
I think somebody threw that game, and you probably shouldn't
Possible.
But either way, for some reason, like, I remember calling it like something that had to do with throwing. So either way, it was it's a good list. And Simic does what Simic does. I mean, it's kind of the quote-unquote bad version of Thrasios, but like it still does the thing. So
yeah,
to be able to do it at this power level is still pretty cool.
Yeah.
Then, so if we go back here, what else did we have that was kind of unique? So let's talk about the Parcel Beast deck next. So this was Joe, who we play with quite a bit. And Parcel Beast, I guess the closest comparison is kind of Gretchen. It's like doing Gretchen things, but slightly differently. And I know I basically let you do the talking here because I know you know these decks in and out better. I'll commentate on my own, but the rest of these, like, you're the expert. So I know that it does have an activated ability that says look at the top 2 cards of your library. If it's a land, put it on the battlefield. If not, you put it in your hand. So it's essentially look at the card. If it's a land, put it on the battlefield. If not, it goes in your hand. So it's draw for a mana and tapping. And it can still abuse the untappers to be able to do that multiple times in a turn. But that's about what I know of it.
Yeah, so it's basically another Simic commander who basically reads the same as Thrasios, except instead of costing 4, Parcel Beast costs 1 and taps, which means it has a much higher ceiling compared to Gretchen whenever you mutate it onto something like a Horseshoe Crab, which lets you pay a blue to untap the Horseshoe Crab.
Right.
At which point, you're basically getting Gretchen activations for 2 mana instead of 4.
Which is pretty good.
But it requires that higher level of synergy and requires you to play some cards like Horseshoe Crab that don't really do anything on their own.
Right.
But it gets some extra unique combo lines, has that higher power if you get the synergy going. It just requires a bit more work. Like, there's also Banishing Knack in this deck, which Gretchen does not play, because you can actually combo off with that.
Right.
With some of these untapping creatures and things like that.
Right, because the Nat combo requires, what, like a 0-drop rock, and then... Or does it even require? He doesn't have any 0-drop rocks in here. I thought that's what it required.
No. The standard line does, but Parcel Beast lines are not quite that. Oh, if you just have, like, land enchantments on a land, and a Banishing Knack on, say, a Horseshoe Crab, then you can bounce your Peregrine Drake or your Cloud of Fairies, and then cast it net mana and untap your Horseshoe Crab or your Glimmer Bell, depending on how much mana you're netting.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
So Parcel Beast gets unique Banishing Knack lines. And
then otherwise looks like it's playing pretty much the same sort of staple, removal, tutors, etc., draw spells.
Land tappers, land enchantments.
You can see that it's pretty similar, but then there are some differences. Still, pretty cool. It's an interesting take on the same sort of idea, and like you said, a little more unique because of having that Banishing Knack combo. Oh, I guess I totally forgot to even mention this one earlier. My apologies. There was another unique one that we could talk about now. It was Satyr Enchanter. This one is Celestia, and it's basically Sithis at the uncommon level, so to speak.
Yep.
And I see where it's played the way I would play Sithis if I didn't have access to the cards I do have access to in cPDH, but so it's basically just whenever you cast an enchantment, you draw a card. And for what I saw of it, I did play against the deck in one of the pods that I was in. It is basically just tutoring auras, suiting up, and trying to kill people with the Satyr.
Just Celestia, Voltron with an absurd amount of card draw when it gets to go off. This deck has been around since like the beginning of the format. It fell off for a long time, at least in the online meta, but someone decided to pick it up, and it gets a lot of value out of cards like Broken Fall, enchantments that return to your hand as part of their cost or effect.
Which is exactly what I do with Sithis. It's Whip Silk, and there's the White Flickering Ward, and they both are 1 mana, and then that same color mana to bounce to your hand, so you can just do it over and over and draw a bunch of cards if need be. So it does have that storm element in a sense, but just for drawing cards. Yeah.
And then just punch people.
Well, and then, stuff like Ancestral Mask is just absolutely busted.
Especially with 4 Gretchens, whenever you have enchantments that count all enchantments in play, like Yavimaya Enchantress doesn't count just your own enchantments for the pump, and Gretchens can really buff that thing up.
Yeah. They could get out of hand pretty fast if the right decks are there. And then just your own stuff. I mean, so much of it being 1 and 2 mana, not a lot to, a lot to count when you have something like that out. And it's just like, holy shit, it gets like +10/+10 all of a sudden. One of the other unique ones was, looks like Finn is the last unique besides my own. So Finn, I mean, like I said, I did build this at one point. Because Finn cares about Death Touchers. Any creature with Death Touch that deals combat damage to a player gives them 2 poison counters. He also has Death Touch himself, so it automatically is putting pressure on people. So I assume it's played in an aggro sense. That's kind of what I did. You have a ton of Death Touchy creatures that can get in, and you try to get to that magical 10
poison counters, 10 infect, however you want to call it.
Either way. So yeah, it's basically just trying to get to infect. The issue that I found with the deck, and just infect in general, is that you have 3 opponents, and trying to get them all to 10 doesn't always happen. A lot of times you'll be able to kill 1, maybe 2. So is there anything that I'm missing here that maybe helps speed that up?
We did get a few new Proliferate cards in the last couple sets with the Phyrexian stuff coming out, but in general, this is just play cheap Death Touchers, hope you can get there, get by on the fact that no one wants to block them because they have Death Touch. Yeah. But in general, this tends to be just a bit too slow for cPDH, at least in tournaments, especially when people are comboing off on turn 5, turn 6.
Yeah, it
that's
has
the way
a
I
hard
would
time
see
getting
it too.
there. Right.
And your commander gets removed, and your board does nothing now. You have a bunch of 1-power Death Touchers.
Right.
Which happened when I played against the deck.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't seem great, but perhaps they were trying to prove something, and they just didn't get there. Maybe the next time they will. So then we had also... last couple here before we get to the top 4. We had a couple Gut decks. I played against both of them. And I know in both cases neither won. Aaron was the one killing me in the 3rd round, and I had to use my resources to try and stop him from killing me, and then Gator was like, "You're all tapped out? Cool, I win." And that was the end of that game. Prior to that, I played with Kungsk, and he and I kind of alley-ooped each other to kill everyone else. He thought he'd be able to beat me in the 1v1, but I had enough bounce spells that I kept bouncing Gut before it would make its skeletons, and then I ended up casting an Electrickery to wipe all of the skeletons he already had. And then, it was pretty much just I killed him instead. I drew like 15 cards on one turn and got my combo and just won. So, either way. Gut leader. So its Gut is a commander that when it attacks, it has a sack trigger to sack an artifact or a creature, and then you get a 4/1 black skeleton that has menace. It comes in tapped and attacking. With this background inspiring leader, as long as he controls Gut, all of the tokens get +2/+2. So instead of 4/1s, they're now 6/3s, and that's pretty fucking scary, let me tell you. Especially if it gets going pretty quickly and you get a bunch of those out. He could be presenting, 20 12 damage in a couple turns, and you're just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm just almost dead now.
Yeah, Gut is very much a staple aggro deck of the format, just because people don't want to interact with it if they're not the first person that Gut's attacking. They want to save that interaction for the combo decks, which means Gut, more often than not, will get a first trigger and then be able to hold up mana for protection spells for the rest of the game to make sure that they don't get blown out. And then once they've knocked over the first opponent, they've just got a massive board of 6/3s, 3 or 4 of them, and can just kind of take out the other 2 players in pretty quick succession. But yeah, it's another deck that gets blown out pretty hard if the commander gets countered or removed before it gets its first trigger, and then has to recast Gut. It can be really problematic for that deck.
Yeah. And then if for synergy's sake, it also is playing a bunch of goblins and things that come in and create an additional token to be sacked to Gut to turn into a skeleton. So it can go pretty fast, and it's not like Corvold, to make a cEDH reference. It's not like Corvold where you're literally sacking your whole board half the time just to do busted things. In this case, you're just sacking one thing at a time, and you're making a token that's huge. And when they're 4/1s, they're pretty easy to block, even with Menace, if you have like tokens or anything like that. But when they become 6/3s, it's a pretty big challenge.
Yeah, the 4/1s are annoying, the 6/3s are deadly.
Correct. Yeah, for sure. And I've seen it in the games that I've played against it, in the tournament and outside of the tournament. It puts people at low life totals pretty fast and pretty consistently.
Yeah, it's usually looking to have the game over by turn 8, and that's killing a player on turn 6, and then the next one on 7, and the next one on 8.
Yep, just bam.
Yep.
And then the last couple here, there was Dargo Keleth, which, as I said, on paper just seems kind of weird, but then like the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. Dargo's a weird one. It's a 7/5 for 7 mana, but you can sack any number of artifacts and or creatures to reduce that cost by 2 for each thing sacrificed. And if you've sacked anything else, like say you sacked an artifact 4 mana, it also counts that as the 2, so it's technically 3. So you can really easily cast him for 1 red, and then he's this huge beater. And a lot of times that's just a distraction, or he's part of a combo, or it's just he's going to continue to beat people who are open until somebody dies. And then, like I said, depending on what the partner is, it could be combos and other things too. And in this case, with Keleth, it's a 1/1, but it says whenever a commander you control attacks, put a 1/1 counter on it. Super basic, seems innocuous, but like you get Keleth down, you get Dargo down, and now all of a sudden Dargo swings and he's an 8/6. So he's a 2-shot on anyone, because commander damage here is only 16. But then Keleth itself kind of just sits there and nobody cares until it's a 5/5, now it's a 6/6, and you're like, oh shit, like there's 2 big threats now. And at least in the games that I've played against this deck in particular, that's kind of what happened. People didn't care about the Keleth. They probably removed the Dargo, but the Dargo is so easy to recast because you just keep sacking things that it doesn't really matter. And I'm sure there's more to it than that, so any other insights that you have?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really strong deck at taking out the problem player first, similar to how Gut plays, except this one's all in the command zone. Your threat's not being spread out. Which means it can just kind of get walled by really big walls, but that's not typically going to happen. The list is on double strike spells like Buccaneer's Bravado to be able to actually just one-shot a player on turn 3, which can be pretty insane when that actually happens. But yeah, for the most part, this is a deck that's just trying to take out the problem player as soon as possible, or just hit everybody once, and then be able to threaten lethal on anybody at any time. It has a lot of protection, again, similar to Gut, playing that Boros aggro style, where you get to play a bunch of cards like Blacksmith's Skill and Stave Off, those kind of effects, a bunch of fodder. A lot of the 99 between this deck and the Gut decks will actually probably look pretty similar, because they're all playing the Goblin package for sacrifice fodder and things like that.
Yeah, makes sense.
other notable cards are Dragon Breath and Dragon Scales, the enchantments that pair really well with Dargo. Basically give it haste and vigilance for the rest of the game, unless there's Grave Hate at the table.
Right. Yeah, I've seen Dragon Breath. I had not seen Dragon Scales, but I see why. That's pretty good. Because you cast your Dargo for 1 and it just pops out and attaches.
Yep.
In either
Just
case.
decent little benefit.
I mean, Vigilance on a big beater is always good. Always. Unless you're swinging into Death Touchers, I guess, then it doesn't matter. But otherwise, Vigilance
Unless
is
there's
pretty
a
good.
Fid.
Yeah, it looks like
pretty
a pretty
simple
strong
deck.
Pretty strong. Pretty interesting. Very similar to Gut, but like I like both of them for different reasons. And then I guess the last one before we get into the top 4 is my deck, which was Malcolm Kedis. And the reason I picked this deck specifically was because I played it in cEDH. So I already have reps on it and kind of knew what to do as far as the main combo that's in this list. Whereas there are some additional things you can do in cEDH that you don't have access to here, but that was fine. It just basically like cut out one of my win cons and still had, basically the same thing. Where the difference would be with between this and the cEDH version is, obviously the rocks are not as good, and then, we don't have access to some of the interaction. But for the most part, I think I got a good handle on what the types of staples you would want for this. I played it a lot before the tournament came up to make changes, because my initial list and what's there now probably went through like 3 or 4 iterations where I swapped out a good 5 cards or so. Eventually settling on what I have here. So main game plan, Malcolm, if you don't know, but you should by now. Please, seriously, everybody, know who Malcolm is. 2/2 flyer, whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to an opponent, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. Now, if you pair this with something else besides Kedis, it's just that. It's you hit somebody with Malcolm, you get a treasure, Bob's your uncle. With Kedis reads, whenever a commander you control deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. So that also applies to Kedis, though. You're usually not swinging with him unless things have gone horribly wrong. Generally, you're swinging with Malcolm into one player. It does 2 damage to all players, and then you create 3 treasure tokens. And then it gets fun when you add curiosity effects like Ophidian Eye, where you can be just drawing 3 cards on top of that, and yada yada. So that's the main value engine. It's always going to be popping out treasures, so you're always going to have mana to be able to do what you want, and the majority of the cards in the deck are like 3 CMC or less, so pretty easy to be able to cast multiple spells every turn. Lots of these are cantrips, so you'll cast it to look at your cards and pick one to put in your hand, or, apply some sort of effect, like stupid ones like Expedite, like apply haste. But, if Malcolm just came down, you can slam this, give him haste so you can attack, draw a card, it replaces itself, yada yada. So, but then the main combo requires any of these pingers like Firebrand Archer, Kessig Flame Breather, Reckless Fireweaver, any of these guys, Ingenious Artillerist, the Strong Bull, any of these guys out, and then a thing that lets you change their creature type. So there's Image Crafter, Amoeboid Changeling, there's, what's the charm? Trickery Charm.
Trickery, yep.
Yeah. Then there's Blades and Wings of Velos Veil. There's a few others, but for the most part, you want to get one of those cards and one of these pingers. You turn the pinger into, because all of them do damage to each opponent based on a certain thing. Reckless Fireweaver is probably my favorite because it's just straightforward. If an artifact enters the battlefield, it does 1 damage to each opponent. Well, if it's a pirate, now it has the same thing as Malcolm and Kedis together, where it does the damage to everything. And as long as Malcolm's on the field, you make 3 treasures. So then there's 3 damage, and then it loops and loops and loops until the table's dead. So, very easy to put together. I was presenting wins prior to the tournament, like on turn 4 or 5. In the tournament, on the first game, I want to say I tried around turn 5, got stopped, and then I ended up losing the game. The second game, I don't recall what turn it was. I think it was like 10 maybe, but I still managed to get there after a long game of politics and back and forth. And then third game, like I said, we all kind of just got blown out. But I think it did pretty well. I'm happy with it. I think it's a strong deck. There is a concession to be made that maybe Breaches is a little better just because of the card advantage it can provide. but I just like the all-in go fast of this. I am a Dirty Storm and Adnos player at heart, so I want to go fast. I want to go all in and make people have it. If they have it, they have it. If they don't, well, I'll just try again next turn.
Yeah, I think any blue-red Malcolm deck is competitively viable. You know what? Maybe even Togo. That one needs to be proven still, but you know what? It's still blue-red Malcolm.
Right.
I personally prefer Breaches, but I've played Malcolm Kedis, and it's also amazing. I also played in cDH. Love that deck.
Man
But
after my own heart. I'm sad that you don't get the Glinthorn because it's so easy. I'm also sad.
Too easy.
I'm also sad that you can't do like in my cDH version. I did the Pyre of Heroes and included some extra pirates, and you kind of go up the chain to get the Glinthorn. All that stuff's good and fun, but not possible here.
Yeah, pot up your dock side. Yep. Not quite here.
Not quite. No. All right, so that's pretty much everything that we had going there. Now it's basically just talking about the top four. I mean, up to that point, it was all there. The people who got to the top four, you know, I think deserve to be there. They all performed well in their games. I didn't see any of the games from the Gretchen player, but except for the final. But everybody else I either played against or saw play other games, and I think they played well. And, I mean, they're known quantities in the format. I mean, these are guys that are vocal on, various social medias and have channels and put out content, and, you know, they're active, entrenched people in this format, so, of course, they're going to show up in the finals, right? So,
pretty much.
So let's start with, we'll just go from right to left here, starting with Gretchen. So you said that there were some differences between this list and yours. Can you be more specific?
Yeah, I can. So this version is 7 cards different from the version that I was playing, 5 cards different from my public version. Some interesting cards, notably, is there is an extra Trinket Mage package in here. To supplement that, they're playing Lotus Petal and Conjurer's Bauble. I believe the Conjurer's Bauble is in there just as a way to put your Freed from the Reel back into the deck if your line gets interrupted.
Makes sense.
And then they're also on Alexi's Cloak, which instant speed gives a creature Shroud, which we actually saw them get burned by the effect in the finals.
Because he tried to target himself and couldn't because of Shroud?
Well, he was casting a Freed from the Reel, and someone tried to interact with that creature, and they, in response, gave their creature Shroud. And then we saw the problem, because you can't Freed from the Reel your creature if it has Shroud.
Right.
So it basically just counterspelled their own Freed anyways.
Ouch.
And then they're also on some cards that I used to play that I stopped playing, like Avoid Fate, Negate, and Rhymewind Taskmage are the 3 that they play that I used to play, but I don't anymore. But yeah those are the only big changes.
Avoid Fate, I remember when I discovered that card, I was like, wow, it's a counterspell in green, and I tried running it, and then I ended up cutting it too. It was in my Sithis deck for a little while.
It's good, but we got a new land tapper and a new land enchantment in one of the new Phyrexian sets, which this deck isn't on, and that's what I cut Negate and Avoid Fate for, just more redundancy.
Right. No, that makes sense. I think that's what having the redundancy gives you consistency, and that's why competitive decks do better than non-competitive ones, because they have that redundancy. And unfortunately, at common level, there are some things that have a lot of redundancy and other things that just don't have any. So you kind of have to pick and choose your battles, and that kind of colors what commanders you can pick or what colors you want to use, etc. So I think a lot of it is determined by that card pool and that redundancy as far as being able to make something super competitive.
And that's definitely reflected in what decks made top 4. All of them have just an insane amount of redundancy compared to some of the other decks in the format that might not have even shown up at the tournament. Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, a little bit different, but it sounds like, outside that unfortunate misplay, it still made it to the final, and it still did something. So, I mean, it's got to be a good deck. Give it up to Rusty for making it to the final, top 4.
Absolutely.
Next one up is our buddy Ryan from the Common Connoisseurs, who was playing Third Path Iconoclast, which, ironically, I was around when he first brewed this, and he played it on my channel, and I don't think it won, but it did all right. I have an almost negative-sounding opinion about the deck in that, not his in particular, but just the deck in general. I kind of feel like it's a do-nothing deck until it can win. Like, it kind of durdles and looks unassuming, and then people maybe don't focus it, don't do anything to it, and then all of a sudden it goes and wins. In the games that I've played around with it, he did have the ability to put out a lot of tokens and, you know, put pressure on the board that way. I lost to him on the stack because he managed to get out 2 pingers, and I was trying to remove something, and he was able to just on the stack continue to cast spells and ping us to death because the table had taken a lot of damage. A lot of that was because of me swinging Malcolm around with Kedis, so there was also I don't remember who else was in that pod with us, but we ended up having everybody kind of was draining each other out, so our life totals became low enough to where he kind of just said, okay, now I can burn you out, and proceeded to do that. Now, that's not to say that the list is bad. It's not to say that he's a bad pilot, because obviously he made it to the top 4. He did well. He played his deck the way it's supposed to be played, or however you want to say it. It was just kind of like infuriating to lose like that. So that's probably why I have that kind of opinion of it. But, you know, again, not to say that it's bad. It's just one of those things where it was like, man, that sucked.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people call TPI a mid-range deck, but it's really not. It doesn't have much of that mid-game potential to just win the game, necessarily. It's definitely more of a curiosity control deck. It plays all the curiosity effects, it plays Sigil of Sleep, it plays all the pingers. The way this deck wins is just grinding value and pinging people down, and just making sure no one else wins the game until this deck just kind of wins from the damage, just like you're saying.
Yeah, and it also kind of gets by too by being alley-ooped by other decks that are draining the table. The place where I would see, yeah, I was gonna say it always has 1/1s. So as long as he's got a pinger out and TPI out, it's just cast anything. Cast this Consider. Now you've got a ping on the stack plus a body, and like in the case of ours, it was. I want to say it was Firebrand Archer plus Reckless Fireweaver, so it was like ping for the cast and then ping for the artifact creature entering the battlefield. So it was just like 2 damage every time he cast anything. And then I was swinging around hitting people, and it was 2 damage to everybody every time I swung, and then somebody else was doing other stuff, so it ended up where, yeah, everybody kind of got low, and then you're able to finish it off. Yeah, I would call it a control list as well. I don't think it's mid-range. It's definitely not aggro, even though I'm sure there's a way you could kind of try to play it as an aggro list. I don't know that would be better.
Spells, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's combat tricks and things you could do, I suppose, but yeah, I don't think that's good either.
It just kind of rides the line where it's like, this pinger is not the most threatening thing at the table, so you're not going to remove it until I put a curiosity on it, of course. So I'm just going to get passive damage off this and sit here and make sure no one else can win. And it's got those big card draw spells with like Distant Melodies to make sure it doesn't run out of gas. And yeah, it just sits there, controls the board until everyone's low, and then it storms off or punches people with the massive board it makes.
Right. Yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty decent deck. It's just kind of in a place where it can sit back and not do a lot until it needs to win. And I think for that reason, people maybe need to take this out a little faster. The combo or the Dargo player needs to smash this guy's face in, because it's just going to win later on if you don't.
Yeah, it's really tough for aggro to beat this in a 1v1 setting. And if you're playing aggro and don't focus this deck, you will end up in a 1v1 against it. So they kind of have to target TPI pretty early on, which can be awkward.
Because it doesn't feel like it feels like you're wasting your time. But
yeah, it's like, why am I not punching Malcolm right now? But you can also just kind of pray Malcolm doesn't have it, whereas if you let this deck exist, they're going to draw 7 cards and find Sigil of Sleep or a bounce spell, and it's going to be rough.
Right. And I think that it is uniquely positioned to prey upon decks that are doing other things. So for that's a reason why it's here, I suppose. So moving on to the next was the other half of the Comic Connoisseurs, and that was Clay. And he was playing Malcolm as well, but with Dargo. So as we said before, Dargo, pretty easy to cast. It's a big beater. Malcolm is making treasures that can help you cast your Dargo over and over and over again. Outside of that, Clay's deck is, I don't know, unique, or if unique is the word you want to say, but it's basically running the same kind of stuff that I was, as far as like the Changelings and the Fireweaver and stuff. Less copies of those things, so less redundancy. It's not on Curiosity that I see, so not doing that part, but it is running the Vanishing Knack or Retraction Helix combo with the 0 drops to be able to have a secondary combo. And I want to say, I don't know, what is it? It's Battered Golem and Steelfin Whale that can combo with that.
Battered Golem, Steelfin Whale. Looks like those are the only two. Yeah. So Battered Golem or Steelfin Whale.
And those are just tap and untap to be able to bounce the rocks to then be able to make... That's just Infinite Storm. What's the outlet? Oh,
yeah,
the outlet is like Reckless Fireweaver, right? You just bounce them.
Yeah, one of your pingers. Or, yeah. I'm pretty sure it's just the pingers. Clay also is playing notably Tooth of Chisgoria, which is his spice for Banishing Knack combo decks, because it is a potentially 0-mana artifact with flash, essentially.
Yeah.
So you can win on top of other decks, which I thought if Clay had a pinger in play during the finals, during that last turn, he actually could have won on the stack on top of Gator's win, which would have been amazing because he had the Tooth and the Knack, but he didn't have an outlet, which
rough.
was unfortunate.
But yeah, that would have definitely been pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing a lot of similarities between his list and mine. Just that the Knack package is different, and then, you know, a few other choice selections that are different, but very similar kind of list. Still trying to do things with the pirate changing stuff, but then also having that instant speed potential win. Pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it's doing the same kind of thing in a different way, and then it also just has the ability to Dargo people in the face, which is always strong.
Oh, and it also has some Malcolm-specific combos with Quicksilver Dagger and Viridian Longbow. If they're on a pirate with Malcolm in play, and you put a Freed from the Reel on that creature, then you can tap to ping somebody, make a treasure from Malcolm, use that treasure to untap, get Freed from the Reel, and go down that line. So his list is on a bunch of different combo lines. It's just combo heaven, Dargo, Malcolm. So,
and I mean, when you have these commanders in the command zone, they do so much already by themselves that just having the ability to combo with them, very strong. It goes to show why there were, you know, quite a few partner pairings in this partner/background, which is essentially the same thing. There was so much of that represented here in the tournament because it seems to be the strongest thing you could be doing right now. I mean, obviously there are Gretchens and some outliers that do really strong things, but the partner pairings in the background seem to be what a lot of people like, and I mean, that's kind of what I see as being the top end right now.
Yeah, similar to cPDH, just the absurd versatility that they tend to have, and being able to just pick your colors, and they're strong in their own right in the first place, to be potentially their own commander, just absurd how powerful they are.
I agree. Alright, so final last one. It is the first place winner, our friend Gator, your co-host from your podcast, running Abdel, Adrian, and Sword Coast Sailor. So we haven't talked about Abdel yet. Abdel is a 4/4 for 4 and a white. When it ETBs, you can exile any number of other non-land permanents you control until it leaves the battlefield. So it's basically an O-ring for your stuff. And each thing that you tuck creates a 1/1 soldier creature token. So, Sword Coast Sailor, he readily admits is here just for the colors. I never saw him cast it. I don't think I've ever seen him cast it. I don't think he ever will cast it. It's not part of the game plan at all. And that's similar to a lot of other
Yeah.
partner pairings out there in the world, especially in cDH, where you're just picking the partner for colors and you don't care about it at all. So in this case, that's not important. What is important is that he plays a lot of creatures that have ETBs, like Spirited Companion or Inspiring Overseer, Priest of Ancient Lore, etc., that will just ETB draw a card. And then, Archaeomancers, Trinket Mages, other things that, or Mnemonic Walls, things that will bring stuff back or tutor stuff out of your library that you can reuse over and over again. And the way to do that is with cards like Cloudship, Ephemerate, etc., etc. There's a ton of Flicker of Fate, Blinks. Anything that blinks will remove. A lot of times it just flickers to where Abdel leaves the battlefield momentarily. All the things come back. You get all their ETBs. Then he comes back down. You put them all back under, and you make a ton of soldiers. Also notable, his soldiers have essentially vigilance in this case. If they were not created this turn, you swing at them first, then you do all this other stuff, and then bring them back as blockers, because they can also be exiled as well. So a lot of that kind of stuff, and then it gets more complicated from there, where you basically are bouncing the Archaeomancers to get those flickers back, to keep doing that, and then finding outlets, which I'm not 100% on, so I'll let you fill in that blank.
Yeah, so notably, Abdel hits not just creatures, but any non-land permanent, which enables a lot of combo lines where you're exiling your mana rocks under Abdel, which means if you have, for example, 2 mana rocks that tap for any color mana, and an Archaeomancer in play, if you put Abdel down, floating 2 mana, and you exile your 2 rocks and Archaeomancer, and then you cast Cloud Shift, flicker your Abdel, you get it back with the Archaeomancer, you've used one of your floating, still have one more, you tap your 2 rocks for 2 more mana, and put them all under Abdel again. They're just very easy to go infinite with this commander, and you're going to be able to draw through your deck, loop whatever you want. As for outlets, we have Peregrine Drake and plenty of other ways to make infinite mana.
Oh, and the one that I know about
have-
is the Chalice, Hierophant's Chalice. And it ETBs, target opponent loses a life, you gain a life. Well, if you do this over and over and over, you just drain the whole table.
Yep, so Hierophant's Chalice will drain the table. You also have Vessel of Endless Rest, as well as Wormfang Newt, plus Mystic Sanctuary, which will allow you to loop any instant or sorcery in your deck to be able to cast Deep Analysis infinitely. Target player draws 2 cards. You can draw the table out. Same as Simic infinite mana decks.
Right.
So those are the main win conditions.
Yeah, the Newt,
think he's
he was
playing
saying...
much other.
The Newt, I think, is what he won with in my game against him, and he was saying it was the first time he'd pulled it off, but it doesn't do the same thing because it's more focused on a land, so it exiles a land until it leaves, so it, in conjunction with Abdel, creates a loop where you're continuously getting Mystic Sanctuary back, and it's kind of replacing the Archaeomancer with a land, which is the same thing, but different and cool, unique.
Yeah. And yeah, it puts it on the top of your deck, which might matter. You have to be able to draw it, all that stuff. But yeah,
all that
you
takes
just
is
draw
one
the
of these
table
ETB
out.
creatures, or having access to one of those draw spells over and over again.
Yep. So you just draw the table out, or you draw until you get your Hierophant's Chalice in play, and then continue your loop and drain the table out. Or you just make infinite 1/1s past the turn and try to control the table until you untap and kill everybody that way. At absolute worst.
Which I think he said he won one of the games that way because he didn't have anything and it was his Hail Mary and nobody had anything, so he ended up getting it. So yeah, I mean, having all of those different options to win is why it's consistent. It's got a lot of interlacing synergies. I'd say the main weakness of the deck is probably that you need so many different pieces that if Abdel is getting removed a bunch to the point where you can't afford to cast it, maybe that's going to be a problem. Oubliette obviously could be a problem as well because then you can't really do the things that you need to do. But and also just not having a ton of tutors kind of sucks because there are like pieces that you want that you can't necessarily get unless you had a tutor, which, I mean, I guess that's the problem with the whole format, really, but I digress.
Yeah. Yeah, Abdel is just slow in comparison to a lot of the other decks. This deck usually isn't going to be able to present a win until turn 7.
Yeah.
But the thing that Abdel does have is that once it starts presenting a win condition, unless you remove multiple pieces, it will be presenting a win every turn, just repeatedly, unless you really do something about it, like getting rid of the Archaeomancer effects in play or whatnot, because all of the pieces just sit there. If you counter Abdel, I just cast Abdel again and try again next turn, just over and over, and it's so good at forcing the issue.
And then also has a wall 90% of the time where, like I said, you swing out with your tokens, and then you flicker them all, and they come back, and they're blockers. And, yeah, I mean, as many creatures as you might be able to throw, there's enough blockers to just kill them. And a lot of the popular commanders only have 2 toughness, you know, so blocking with 2 1/1s that you created for basically no investment, pretty easy ask. So, yeah, I think it was a really good deck. I mean, it was good enough that it inspired me to try and build my own Abdel. I'm using a different background, but we won't talk about that right now. But it is a cool looking deck, and I've seen some other variants with other backgrounds that do similar but different things. And I think, I mean, it's even in cEDH with it does a good World Gorger Dragon impersonation with Animate Dead, without the downside of getting blown out like World Gorger Dragon decks have. So it's a strong card, to say the least. So yeah, I mean, with that, I wanted to bring in Gator himself and ask him some questions about what his thoughts were and his experience was in the tournament. So give us just a second, and we'll be right back. All right, so we've got the winner of the whole thing. The first opening Sanctuary tournament, 16-player event. Came down to a pot of 4, as we discussed here a little bit ago, and this was the winner. Say hello, Gator. Hi, Gator. What's up?
Hey, what's up, you guys? Pleasure to be here. I really appreciate you guys doing this. So,
yeah, as I told Puzzle and the viewers at the beginning of this, I didn't see anybody talking about wanting to interview you, and I didn't see anybody talking about wanting to do a breakdown of the tournament. And I was really surprised, given some of the people who were in the tournament that also are content creators, that not wanting to do that. And since I'm like the newest member here and also not a cPDH guy, like I didn't understand why I was the one who wanted to do this, but that's aside. I wanted to do it. Now, granted, Bobby and Joe did put out an episode yesterday that did kind of cover it, and Joe gave his perspective of what happened with him in the tournament. So that's out there, and I'll link that in the show notes so that people can check it out. It's the Scattered Thoughts podcast, which is only on its 2nd episode, so pretty much brand new. And then, of course, we're going to be recording after this for your show, Common Theory, and I'm not sure exactly what we're going to talk about, so I'm not even going to try and guess. So, like I said, there was kind of a hole here that I felt needed filled, and so I got Puzzle. After I saw him commentate, I knew he was perfect to slot into this to help me talk about the decks, because I would have been treading water poorly without his knowledge. So, again, thank you. But yeah, so we've gone over that, and now I just had some questions I wanted to talk to you and get your perspective as the guy who went 4-0 and just totally crushed all of us like a boss.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like, I'm an open book. What do you got for me?
So I guess I wanted to start I do know some of your history already, but like I do this with people that are on my podcast and or just have been on my show. I've asked lots of people, like, what's your history with Magic? So, but I guess because this is cPDH focused, we'll start there. Like, I know you've been playing since the 90s, so obviously Pauper has not been a thing since then. So like, how long have you been playing PDH in general, or like cPDH as it is today?
I've actually been playing since the format evolved way back when. So actually, the first deck I ever had was Crackling Drake, and so I attempted to build a deck way back when, and I've always loved Pauper, and I can't emphasize how much it was a split between Legacy to Pauper. So it was a lot of fun, and it was kind of cool just playing with like the same cards I knew from Legacy and into Pauper. So it was an easy transition, because a lot of those cards are the same, like Ponder, Brainstorm, Preordain. Those were all like an easy transition to go from one to the other. So
Well, Legacy being an eternal format too. Like obviously there is going to be that carryover. I know we get that with cEDH, and those cards you just named are played in cEDH too. So
exactly.
Yeah. So that sort of carryover, if you are from other formats, is definitely going to be a thing. I didn't realize that you played as much 60 card prior to getting into it, but that's a cool kind of segue into it. So you said you started with Crackling Drake. What sort of decks do you usually play now? Obviously we know what deck you played to win, but like what are some decks that people go, that's a Gator deck?
So I have to say, when I entered the format, I was like the control guy, but now when most people think of me, or even like just people in general, Gut, Dargo, just hyper aggressive, balls to the wall, as efficient as possible decks, right? Like I'm trying to be I'm from point A to point B. I'm not trying to do anything else, right? Like I need to get there. I want to end the game, and then I want to go grab a drink or have some water, right? Like that's the goal that I have. So
if you ain't first, you're last, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I do have to apologize. I'm a little bit under the weather right now, so you'll hear me kind of clear my throat and things of that nature, and be drinking a lot of liquids, so apologize for that one.
All good. Life happens. I'm glad that you were still able to make it, because I needed this, because I have to put it out by tomorrow. So it was a little last minute, but it worked out because it's my day off and yada yada. But yeah, thank you for powering through it for us.
By all means, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So how does the deck you won with, the Abdel Sword Coast, how does that differ from the decks you... I mean, you kind of already answered this question, but maybe people haven't picked that up yet. How does it differ from those decks you said that are like Gator decks, like the fast, aggressive ones? How does Abdel... Because, me and Puzzle just broke it down. It's not an aggro list by any means. So, like, how did that end up coming about?
So I actually like decks that pivot. So if you look at like Gut Leader is a prime example, that deck could pivot to a mid-range deck, right? I could be the most aggressive deck at the table, or I could pivot into a nice mid-range slow, grind you into the dust, right? Because I have all the draw power. I like the deck could just grind. Abdel is the exact same thing. I'm a combo deck at heart, right? But I'm going to grind you into the dust with 1/1 tokens, draw power, cantrips, like you name it, we're making it happen. And I'm never, technically speaking, the most pressing deck at the table. The way my specific version is built is a win second, not a win first. So I'm never trying to push your face into the dirt for the most part. Now, I do attempt to do that in certain games, depends who I'm playing against, things of that nature. But yeah, for the most part,
it was designed to be
second.
win after. Yeah,
correct. Yeah, it was definitely designed to be win after. And if I can make a soft plug here, over in the comment theory, we actually speak about that in our last episode, talking about if I played Abdel, it is a win second and things of that nature. So you can catch that over there. But
for sure, we can throw a link to all of that good stuff in the notes here as well. So besides this, have you ever played in a tournament before for Magic?
Oh yeah, definitely, man. I've played way too many tournaments. I used to travel with a lot of my friends. We used to actually go around all the states. Me and the wife, we went to Vegas. We've been to a lot of Grand Prix, Grand Prix Miami I've been to, like you name it. I used to travel the scene doing legacy events and things of that nature.
Okay, so I was leaning more towards like, have you done EDH type tournaments before? But that's cool that you actually did GP stuff as well.
Yeah. So I actually did. So locally, we have a big popper, actually, a huge popper crowd. I actually play at Cool Stuff Miami, and we average like 20 to 22 people an event, and it's a lot of fun. From 60 card, and we have a Commander Saturdays. So we actually moved it recently to Commander Fridays, but like it's a lot of fun. We have events. Our average turnout rate is about 20 to 22 people. So.
I mean, that's not bad. It's basically the same thing, so cool. Yeah, so spoilers, that was my first ever, period. Like, I did participate in the MLC last year, which is a group of content creators and adjacent people that do a league over the course of, it was like the whole summer. But it's not the same because you're not there grinding all day. It's like you play a game and then 2 weeks from now you play another game and then 2 weeks from now you play another game and then eventually you get to whoever's got the best points kind of goes into a finals thing and they have their own brackets and stuff. But it was 32 people, I think, like 16 per conference and yada yada. Anyway, so it was kind of more of like a sporting event type thing, but it was also dragged out for so long that it kind of towards the end it was just like, this is a slog. Like it needs to be like, let's do this over a weekend and just do 4 games first day, 4 games second day, cut to finals and go. You know, I would have preferred.
Oh yeah,
that.
definitely.
But anyway, so this was my first like, what's it called, RCQ or REL rules, like.
Yeah, competitive REL.
Right.
So.
This is my first one of those, and it was a blast. I can't wait to do this for cEDH as well. I'm gonna fucking take Tivit and crush some people. But yeah. So next up, let's see. So what sort of prep work did you do to get into this? I mean, aside from building the deck, obviously. Like what do you do to like prep for a tournament?
I'll be honest with you, man. Like I've been playing that deck for a long time. I love Abdel. Abdel was a weird card and weird dynamic in cPDH when it first appeared. There's a long story about that. I'm not going to get into all those details, but I've loved the deck forever and a day. And
I've been CL2 came out what last 2021?
Yes.
It's been 2 years already.
Yeah, I think so.
Holy shit!
Don't make me Google it, but I think
I would have
right
to Google it too. But I think it was
2021. Yeah. September 2021.
Okay, so it's been 2 years. Yeah, that's plenty of time to get reps in. I mean, I'm still exploring stuff with the background.
Never mind.
Myself.
This is the wrong thing.
Don't lead us down the wrong way, Dallas. Don't do it to us, bro.
I know it was
2022.
Okay, so it was last year. I was gonna say I knew I got a box of it because I ordered a box of it. And I went to Vegas for the Command Fest, and then when I came home, it was in the mail waiting for me, and I was like, sweet. After this fucking shitty weekend, I get to open some cards.
Well, let's be honest though, right? Like it was just like that set that was only good for Pauper because everyone hated it.
Honestly,
and Magic got so much backlash, negativity about it.
I loved it.
It is one of the best sets ever for Pauper.
I will have to point out, though, Archivist of Agma came out in that set, and that's a universal staple. There's a few other cards that are in there, too, that are good for other formats, but I agree with you. I've only built one background commander in cEDH. In cPDH, I've built a couple, and I see potential for more. So I think it did lend itself very well to that format, but I think there's a lot of untapped potential. People were down on it. They thought, oh, there's no power. They didn't really give it a chance, I don't think.
I agree to that. There's a lot of cards in there that like they never had the time of day because it wasn't as powerful as what they were already looking at. So they just ignored it, pushed it to the side.
Well, because it wasn't a Jeweled Lotus or the Malcolms and other things that came out the first time. So yeah, I get it, but at the same time, it still needed to be given a chance. And I'm hoping that they revisit backgrounds and maybe print some 2-color backgrounds or 2-color, commanders with choose a background to like open up the pool a little bit more. Because we honestly need more 3-color options. I hate that there's mostly only 2 colors that are viable.
Yeah, I agree. They did a good job of like opening up the field for us, right? Like they did a really good job. They were fixed partners, right? Like that was really what it truly was.
Indeed.
So.
We had a discussion about that on my podcast about the whole history of the partner mechanic and all the different iterations of it, and that's kind of what it is. But so basically, your preparation, as you said, you have been playing the deck for a couple years, and then anything else special, or it was just practice?
Honestly, I've played a lot of different versions of the deck, and tell you the truth, I actually started looking at a few different people's lists, and everybody's lists all had a high amount of lands. And once I cut lands from the deck actually started functioning for me, which I know sounds kind of awkward because a lot of people like a lot of lands. Like, yeah, I don't like a lot of lands.
I don't like lands either. As a cDH player, I want like 29 or less, depending on what I have in the deck. And obviously in this format, you don't have the access and the depth of rocks and things. But you can still, instead of running 35, you can be running like 32 or 33. And it's still a couple more than cDH, but it's like, man, you know how many times I like flood with even 33 lands? It's crazy.
Exactly. That's why I have Ponder, Preordain, Opt, the whole slew of all the cantrips, because now I could use them to find lands if I need lands, or I need to find gas, right? And like top decking late game, I need the gas. I need to win, right? So
yeah. All right. So I mean, as any person who does anything competitively, practice makes perfect, right? So sounds like practicing, changing the deck, making tweaks as needed. That's what I did. I mean, same idea. It was just play the deck, realize that there's something missing, switch it, change it, do whatever, and finally it got to a point where I was like, it's being pretty consistent, and that's what we did. So what was your favorite moment of the tournament, obviously, besides winning the whole thing?
So I have one, and I loved it, and you're going to call me weird. I have a weird card in my list that a lot of people, it's kind of hard to grasp, like, what the card actually does, and it's called Wormfang Newt. It's a newt.
I brought it up.
Dude, I have played that card in my list for about 6 months, I believe it's been in the deck. I have never comboed with it.
And that was in my game.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I had never comboed with that card till the tournament. And I have talked about it. And I'm like, look, worst case scenario, it's just the mana rock. And people are like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But in the event, I was finally able to set up the draw that I needed to blink, to draw, to flip off the top, to make it the actual loop. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, it did... Instead of being a theory, like, I made it a fact. You know what I mean? Like, I was able to actually present.
Finally. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just, it's a weird card. And I know it's a weird card, and it might not be the best card, but to me, I'm a big Wargorger Dragon fan. So because of Wargorger Dragon, yeah, I like that new, bro. And it's like something I used to open up in high school. I used to play it, on the kitchen table. I used to play it on the steps in high school. So it was really cool to be able to actually like finally get the combo off with a new. So that was awesome.
Yeah, it was something to behold because as I recall, and already mentioned earlier, but you weren't here for it. As I recall, Aaron was beating my face in, and I was like, "Hey, stop that!" And I tapped out to stop him from killing me. And then the next player tapped out for whatever reason, and then Aaron was like, "Yeah, blah blah blah," tapped out, and then you came to your turn, not even really paying attention. You were like, "Oh, you're all tapped out? Well, cool." And then proceeded to do that bullshit, and we were like, "Oh, yep. It's just over now." Great.
Yep. Like, and it, it's pretty funny about that. Like, me and you actually did a little bit of preparation prior to the event, and I'm not sure if you guys discussed this, but I wasn't planning to play in the event at all. And I was like,
if I play in the event, had to fill in.
Yeah. So if I would play in the event, I would just have to play this because I lent this deck out to somebody. I lent this other deck out to somebody. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, if I play in the event, this is what I'd be playing. And you were like, yeah. Let's get some games in. Let's get some reps in. And then, like, you kind of knew how to beat me. And prior to that, ironically enough, I was like, bro, if we play, don't tap out against me. Just don't do it. And
I had no choice. But to be fair, I did beat you at least once when you were playing that deck outside of the tournament. So when we were against each other, I was like, I have a chance here. But then Aaron, for whatever reason, I have a target on my back that's like there for Aaron specifically. Because every single game I play with him, it doesn't matter what deck I'm playing, he hits me first, and he hits me consistently. And in that game, he just had his sights on me, and I was like, I can't let you just kill me without doing anything about it. I was already down to like 15 life. I was like, I have to stop you, and I did what I could to stop him. But then everybody went and did stuff and didn't think that you were a threat. And I mean, maybe I should have said something. I don't know, but we probably shouldn't go too deep into that because I'm sure we're gonna have more of this conversation on your own show. Let me Yeah, so I mean I have one last question for you.
Of course, man. Hit me with it.
What comes next for Gator? And you can fill that in however you want. What are you going to build next? What's the next tournament looking like? What are you playing? What are you practicing for? What is next?
I'll be honest. If I play in the next event, and just like this event, I said if I play, I'm playing one of two decks. I was playing Gut Leader, or I was playing Abdel Adrian. One of two. Like that, those were my two decks that I was like, I'm taking one of those. I lent out Gut Leader, didn't have it. Played Abdel Adrian. Next event, hold me to this. I'm playing something like Dargo Kedis. I'm going to sit at the table and do the complete opposite. I'm just going to go, all the cards are here. All right, guys, they're there. I'm going to look over there. Oh, what are we doing? Yeah, that's it. I have no hand, guys. So do what you want. My cards are in play.
No more control, just straight aggro.
The whole opposite side of the spectrum.
I mean, if you can prove that both... I mean, if you could post results and prove that both sides are viable, that's... I mean, it's good for the format. There were, when we discussed it, a couple decks in there that were questionable as far as maybe probably shouldn't have brought this to a tournament. But for the most part, everything I played against, it was viable and strong. Just some seem better positioned. Like I said, it's the partners and the backgrounds. Like, those just seem better positioned to win consistently than anything that's playing by itself. That's not to take away from your Gretchen puzzle, but it just seems like most of the rest of the decks just aren't doing all that much. Even Gretchen kind of looks like it's not doing much until it does. So
yeah, I will say this as a quick caveat: Abdel is a lone soldier, right? The background is essentially irrelevant, so you can put anything there that is blue, and it's just there.
Right.
Maybe it's one more soldier. Like, that's the way you can look at it.
Right. But, yeah, it's cool. Well, again, congratulations on taking the whole thing down and going 4-0. That's a pretty impressive feat. Despite it not being a huge tournament, you still got through who you needed to get through, got there, got the win, took everyone down, and maybe proved some people wrong. Hopefully, that I always love that story of the guy who brings in this deck that people are like, it's not that great, and then he wins, and you're like, maybe it is good, and then all of a sudden everybody's playing Abdel. Me too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, cool. And also thank you both of you for your time, for coming and helping me with this episode so I could get something out for the channel. I'm actually looking forward to kind of doing some of this type of thing more often. Maybe if these tournaments happen on a monthly basis, even if I'm not participating, I could still do a breakdown and interview the top guy. So maybe we can collab on something like this in the future as that happens. We'll talk about it outside of the show. But once again, thank you guys for joining me. To the listeners and viewers, thanks for hanging out and watching. I hope this kind of gives you an idea of what you could expect if you go into a competitive Pauper Commander tournament. And, hopefully some of you would like to come and try it out, because 16 people is cool, but I want to see 32, 64, whatever. Like, I want to see cuts to 16, top 16, and cuts to the finals from there. Like, just a bigger overall tournament scene would be awesome. So we will have links to everything in the description below. Check out these guys' podcasts. Check out the other podcasts I mentioned. Check out my podcast if you want. Also, check out the Sanctuary website. We'll have all that there. You guys can jump on the Discord if you're curious. Talk to people that know how to build decks. I mean, a year ago, I was just trying the format out to fuck around on my channel, and now I'm playing in tournaments. So it doesn't take that long. It does take a while. It is a learning curve, but once you figure it out, it's a lot of fun. So that's it for us today. We'll hopefully see you next month with something similar. Until then, enjoy your day, and we'll catch you next time.